Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice, coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today, I'm joined by Mark Trigger Tregellas. Mark served in the Victorian Police for 31 years and he also served in the Special Forces, Australian Army, 1st Commando Regiment. Mark was medically discharged from the police, suffering from debilitating PTSD. Mark is only the third person in Victoria Police's 150-year history to be awarded the Clarke Silver Medal. The Royal Humane Society of Australasia is Australia's oldest organisation dedicated to recognising acts of bravery. The medal is awarded to the most outstanding cases of bravery considered in that year. I want to play to you an address from Mark as the guest speaker at the 150th anniversary commemorative dinner held last year in Melbourne. After you hear Mark's address, I'll introduce Mark and we will talk about Mark's career and the day that would see him be awarded the Clarke Silver Medal. Here is Mark's address from that commemorative dinner.
His courage, integrity and leadership continue to inspire. Please join with me in welcoming Mark Tregellas.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, members of the Royal Humane Society of Australasia and friends. It is both an honour and a deeply humbling experience to stand before you today. I grew up in suburban Sindel, loving athletics, martial arts after watching Bruce Lee movies, and passionately barracking for Hawthorn. At 19, instead of university, I chose the world. 4 years, 52 countries, a journey that ultimately led me back home to join the 1st Commando Regiment. Those years of challenge, of growth, of standing on unfamiliar soil, forged in me a commitment to purpose. That commitment found its true expression in a career with Victoria Police. Over the next 31 years, I would face situations that tested every part of me, physically, mentally, emotionally and morally. Being a police officer meant confronting the raw edges of humanity, moments of tragedy, desperation and sometimes extraordinary grace. You don't plan to be brave. Bravery is rarely loud or cinematic. It's the quiet decision to act in the face of fear, to stay when others flee, to uphold your values no matter the cost, because as the Roman historian Tacitus once wrote, in valour there is hope. On the 23rd of May 2011, I sat in a reception room in the Melbourne Town Hall. The room next door was filled with family, friends, reporters, the directors of the Royal Humane Society and the Chief Commissioner of Police. We were waiting for the arrival of the Governor-General, Dame Quentin Bryce, who was to preside over my awards ceremony. I was to become only the third police officer in Victoria Police's 150-year history to be awarded the Clarke Silver Medal. A year before, in my hometown in Mallacoota, a 150-kilo man had gone off his meds and was having a psychotic incident. He was attempting suicide by dousing himself with petrol, then carrying the 20-litre jerry can, he walked towards a lit campfire. I grabbed his shirt a mere pace away from the flames and pulled, popping buttons off and flicking petrol back on my shirt and glasses. I let go of his shirt and caught his wrist, trying to pull him away. This is when I discovered he was stronger than me. Professionalism went out the window. As we struggled and my vision narrowed, I locked onto the jerry can as I watched petrol slop out 1/2 metre from the flames. Frustrated at not being able to pull me into the fire with only one hand, he dropped the jerry can. Time slows when you think you're going to die. Your mind flicks through unrelated images. I remember my daughter, aged 5, in a white dress, laughing. The jerry can hit the ground, wobbled, stayed upright, and didn't explode. But before I could appreciate my luck, his now free hand grabbed my wrist, and I realised the struggle was far from over. My boots skidded in the loose dirt around the fireplace, and I saw him come close to knocking over the jerry can. I remember screaming, the smell of the petrol, the heat from the fire. We survived because of my martial arts training. You repeat techniques over and over again until you can do them without thinking. Suddenly the man slipped and he lost balance. His left hand then let go. The next second he was airborne in a wrist lock where he crashed to the ground and was handcuffed. For several minutes I lay next to him, panting, adrenaline causing my hands to shake, staring at the jerry can. Just another day on the job. But survival comes at a cost. You wake up in the night with your heart pounding, every sense so alert you are literally shaking. The nightmare of that day is still fresh in your mind. There is a limit to the amount of trauma you can witness and keep locked away. If you bury enough bad memories, eventually the graveyard runs out of room. I knew I had PTSD, but how do you stop going to critical incidents when it's your job? Then a letter arrived from the Royal Humane Society. I was confused. Isn't what I did that day just part of being a policeman? This thought also ran through my mind in that small room at the town hall, followed by a cascade of different emotions. I felt gratitude for being alive, a sense of humility, knowing that I'd acted on instinct, not for recognition. Pride comes too, not just in the act, but in showing courage when it mattered. But it's tempered by reflection, even dread, at how close things came to tragedy. There's disbelief that it all happened, and a quiet joy knowing someone is alive because of your actions, even though I broke his arm in 3 places. It's not one emotion, it's a swirl of courage, relief, and lasting impact. So I sucked it up, took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and walked into the room. After the presentation, reporters and cameramen rushed forward. Why did you do it? I had thought long and hard over my answer. When you become a police officer, you make an oath. That oath binds you to act when called upon or when circumstances demand such action. The decision to act is easy. The question you ask yourself is, what would I do if it were my loved ones involved? What would I want others to do? It's that simple. That day was the highlight of my career. Since 1874, the Society has stood as a guardian of something incredibly rare and precious, public recognition for private courage. It has told the stories of ordinary people who acted in extraordinary ways, running towards danger instead of away with it, risking their own lives to protect others, often complete strangers. At a time when headlines too often highlight division and crises, the Society reminds us of the best of who we are and who we can be. The Royal Humane Society reminds us that bravery does not belong to uniforms alone. It lives in backyards, beaches, roadsides, rivers and city streets. And thanks to this society, those moments, those split seconds where someone chooses to save another's life over their own safety are not lost in silence. They are remembered, they are honoured, they are recorded in the enduring history of Australia. The Clarke Medal was an incredible honour to receive, but it does not say, look what I did, but rather acknowledges the value we hope endures in our society. Empathy, self-sacrifice, courage. And these values are not abstract, they're practical. They are transformative, they save lives, they inspire others. That's why the work of the Royal Humane Society must not just be preserved, it must be championed, expanded and supported into the future. We need this society and it needs us. Because recognising bravery isn't just about honouring the past, it's about shaping the future, especially in today's world, where young people face overwhelming messages of cynicism, fear and disengagement. The stories told by the Society are a vital counterbalance. They tell our youth, you can make a difference. You can be someone who changes the course of another's life or saves it. You don't need to be rich, famous or powerful. You need only courage and compassion. If we want a society that values character over celebrity, that puts people before profit and integrity before indifference, then we must support institutions like the Royal Humane Society. We must teach our children not only the stories of war heroes or who kicked the most goals in the grand final, but also of the civilian who jumped into floodwaters to save a stranger, the passerby who pulled someone from a burning car, or the teenager who dived into rough surf to rescue a drowning child. These are the people the Society honours, and these are the people who inspire more of the same. But recognition is not enough if it stands alone. And that's why young people, businesses, school, community groups and philanthropic organisations need to take up the cause. Young Australians, they are the next storytellers and standard bearers. They are the next lifeguards, witnesses, everyday heroes. Learn these stories, share them, live them. Businesses, you have the capacity to support the Society financially and to promote its work publicly. Partner with the Society. Celebrate courage in your workplaces. Let your brand stand for bravery, not just business. Associations and educators. Incorporate the Society's values into school programs, leadership development and civic education. Make bravery more than a moment. Make it a model. The Royal Humane Society of Australasia has told these stories for over 150 years through economic depression, world wars and shifting social values. It has endured, not because it is rich or loud, but because it is right. In closing, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the Society, not for my own award, but for what it represents. You have created a legacy where courage is honoured, compassion is remembered, and community is strengthened. My nightmares have been replaced by the memory of that day at the Town Hall, of meeting the Governor-General of Australia and the look on my daughters' faces. Let us all support this legacy. Let us keep these stories alive, not just in books and ceremonies, but in our values, our actions, and our institutions. Thank you.
Mark Trigger Tregellas. What an intro, mate. That address is one of the most moving and most humble addresses I think I've ever heard, and it just goes to show who you are and what policing and being of service means to you. Mate, we're going to talk about that day that you were awarded the Clarke Silver Medal, and we're going to talk later on about you becoming an author, and just this is an absolute honour and privilege to have you on because it gives us a rare insight to what police face in remote areas on a day-to-day basis, the highs, the lows, the challenges, and as you've said in that address, the dangerous situations that you see yourself in. So, mate, welcome to the show. It's an absolute honour to have you here.
Adam, great to be here. Finally,
mate. Yeah, so, mate, after that long intro, mate, before we get into your police and military career, let's go back to a young Mark. Tell us about you growing up as life as a young fella, mate. What were you like at school? Do you have any brothers and sisters, and what are your hobbies?
so basically I was born in 1960 in Sindel, southeast suburbs of Melbourne. And my parents moved there in 56, which was significant because that's when the Melbourne Olympics were on and when television first came to Melbourne. Of course, no one could afford a 12-inch black and white TV set back in those days. So everyone chipped in and got this tiny little set and went down to the Sindel Hall and stuck it on a pew. And then after work, everyone came down and stared at this thing, which I have a hard time trying to get through to my daughters that don't have 85-inch LCD. So 2 out of the 3 schools I went to are now gone. So Sindel State School, Sindel North Primary, and Sindel Technical School, which the first and the third are now gone because suburbs get older, kids move away, and so their schools get put into areas where there are young kids, and there weren't any going to when I was there. But hobbies was huge. I was into athletics massively when I was young, and I managed to find out that I had a really, really good, just a natural ability in high and triple jump. And when I was 19 years old, when I was 17, I had a choice, which was to train for the Olympics. I'd won national, and I had to make that decision as whether or not I was going to get a job where I could train 3 times a day. But back then, no Institute of Sport, no high jump or triple jump coaches specialised in that. This is back in the days of Gail Mulhall and, you know, when everyone was taking these little white pills that made you far better than what you were, which I didn't really want to have to do. So when I turned 18, I took a job as a tree surgeon, and I met a guy who travelled, and he spoke to me, and I got bitten by the travel bug. So I saved every cent I had. I'm the only 18-year-old I know who never went to a pub. And when I turned 19, I left and started travelling. And travelling's great. Everyone you meet's fantastic because you never get to know them long enough to find out their bad points. And instead of having conversations like, well, let's go to the pub, suddenly it's, hey, let's go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or let's go do a canoe trip down the Amazon. So I stayed away for 4 years, kind of in lieu of a university degree. Went to over 50 countries, did things I'll never do again, some I'll never do again, wound up in a couple of prisons, not for doing anything wrong, just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And came home. And of course, when I came home, I was 23 years old. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted something that tested me physically. And so eventually I looked at going into full-time army, but talking to the recruiters at the time, they gave me an excellent piece of advice, and that was if you are looking towards special forces and doing that type of work, then don't come into the army. Join 1st Commando Regiment, which was then 2nd Company out at Williamstown. And if you're good enough after a few years, you can transfer straight in. Kind of a backdoor entry. And so that was it. So I went down and went through the selection process at that time. I think there was over 100 of us on the first day that I remember. 12 months later, I think there was 8 of us left. And it was not because I was the quickest or the fastest or the strongest. I had convinced myself that if I could just put up with all the bullshit, then when I get in, it would all be easier. I was wrong. It didn't get easier. I just got used to it. And that was the story. But after a few years in doing courses and seeing some of the guys getting injured, I did a night jump once did a side door exit out of a C-130, and I had quite a few kilos of P4 strapped to me at the time. And when I got out, it was black, and this is before the days of night vision or anything like that, and to see the ground. And I just got I got ground rush. I got a split second. I was just managed to turn my boots off so I could roll, and hit the ground hard. Didn't injure myself, but when my eyesight adjusted, I looked across. My face was about 12 inches from a barbed wire fence, and I went, ooh. But yeah, that was nothing but pure ass luck. And if that wind had been blowing half a kilometre more, my neck or head or body could have come down on that barbed wire fence, and that would have been serious injury. And I did my para course with the SAS. So I got to know the guys, got to know them. A lot of the guys from that era were fantastic. Nearly all our officers and training cadre staff were from the West, and almost all of them had done, 2 or 3 tours of Vietnam. They had nothing to prove. It was I can never actually remember being ordered to do anything. I was only ever asked to do something, and you tried your hardest to actually do it. So Greg Morks was the OC at the time. Training staff, we had Shorty Ramirez. Barry Young was just an incredible mountaineer. Tex Wesson was a CSM. All those guys were just incredible. We looked up to them. And you could ask any question you wanted. They didn't mind. You could make a mistake so long as you only made it once. If you made it again, then didn't want to go there. But it was fantastic. And look, I enjoyed it. I still keep in contact with a lot of the guys. We still get together. Every time I go down to Melbourne, we, might phone, do a ring around and get together for a pub. Amazingly enough, a lot of the guys went into police, and for some reason, a lot became lawyers, which I could not understand me for the life of me. And I've always been asked what was the difference between somebody who wants to join the military and someone who wants to go into special forces. And I said, other than autism, I said, special forces guys seem to be the guys with a little bit of larceny in their hearts, because they tended to think that way. That's why so many guys went to become police, because they sort of thought like crooks. And I have to agree with them in what they did. It's very interesting when you go to association dinners and you meet guys from the 50s and 60s or guys from, after the 2000s. They're almost all the same in the way they think and in the way they do. So they were definitely after a specific type of person. And so long as you were able, you found that when you thought you couldn't go on anymore, you'd pretty much about 10% of what you're actually capable of. and it taught me a lot of stuff. When I was young, I did martial arts as well. I started off with Tino Seberano in karate. Kate Seberano, the singer, her father, he became one of the grandfathers of karate. Back then, training was brutal. 1,000 sit-ups, 1,000 a session. You would come away with blood down the front of your gi from blood noses and getting hit. It was hard. But what it taught me was really good mental discipline, and it taught me how to take a punch and to keep up and keep fighting. So Tino's still around. I think he's in his 80s now, and there are thousands of people that probably owe mental discipline to him going back in those days. But I realised after that parajump that I wanted to do something else, and I'd always looked at the police force. I thought that would be really good. It would be exciting, but possibly not to the point where I could die just on an ordinary training incident. So in 2025, I pulled the pin and joined Victoria Police.
So, mate, it's what from the early days, and you've had crazy and I will call it life experience, mate. And you went overseas, you travelled for 4 years, and you came back you'd grown up a little bit, and instead of going to uni, you actually went and some, and we'll talk about your book later on, but reading your book and the adventures that you got up to overseas, mate, it's lucky that you didn't die in some of those situations that you got yourself in. But it's life experience. And you mentioned that you had good training from your sorry, mate, okay, I don't know what's going on there. Sorry.
We just had a little bit of a freeze for a second, but you're back.
We're back. Here we go. So, mate, technology, don't you love it? So it's great, isn't it? So, mate, as I was saying, so you join One Commando, it really sets you up, but then you're looking for the next adventure. And in 1985, mate, you decide to join the Victorian Police. And mate, what do you remember of your time at the academy? And back then, was it, I know we could talk about, the wokeness of police now and how it's changed, but back then it was hard, wasn't it?
Back then was very, very different. There was a lot of discipline. Believe it or not, my hardest thing that I felt when I was going through the academy was that they were taking in a lot of people with not a lot of physical ability. And I was coming out of the regiment where I was running 12 kilometres every weekend in the mountains at Callista with one of my mates, and we were just jumping out of our skin with fitness. So when I got into the academy and we were doing all our tests, the instructors came up to me and he said, listen, while you're in the academy, you're meant to be getting better at your physical fitness. And he said, how's about you don't do as well at the start, and then by the end of it, that makes us look good. And I went, yeah, sure, okay, no worries. Very, very different. Back in those days, of course, no mobile phones, and you were able to... It was a very, very different police force back then. Mm. My junior phase training was at Dandenong. My senior phase was in St Kilda. When I graduated, I wound up going to St Kilda, but I soon found out that the city version of policing didn't really appeal to me. You found that most of the guys that did really well in that environment smoked, drank, went to the pub. I didn't do any of that. If you wanted to catch crooks and think like them, you really had to kind of like be around the places that they were going to be and work in with them. And I didn't like that at all. I did try it out for search and rescue, which I really wanted to look at doing. And I thought back in those days, erroneously now, by that stage, I was doing a lot of rock climbing up at Arapiles. I was a ski patroller up on Mount Sterling, and I was a diver. I thought those skills would actually suit me well in search and rescue. What I didn't know was that those skills and the way that I had been taught were not the way they wanted to teach me. And it's very hard to reteach someone than it is to take someone without those skills and teach them. So I didn't get in. Disappointed, but not the end of the world. But I soon realised that I really enjoyed the bush and hiking and being out. I didn't mind working by myself. I had the confidence to do that. So about 5 years in police force, I decided to up stakes and moved all the way out to Portland.
And just, sorry to cut you off, mate, just going back, how long was your training at the academy back then in 1985?
Academy itself, I think, was about 5 months. That included junior and senior phase training, but then you did what was called PSETs, and I think back then it was Probationary Constable's Extended Training Scheme. And what you did was you went round to each different department and spent a couple of months in there. So you worked with Community Policing Squad, now Socket. You did some time with detectives, with the TOG back in those days, the TMU now. Fingerprint on the radio at D24. When people were looking up criminal history, they had to get someone back in those days to go along and actually find cards. And so you spend a bit of time. So at the end of your 2 years of training, you kind of knew how the police force worked. Because when you were giving information for someone as to what to look for or something, you knew what they wanted because you'd done that. And it did really well. It's changed a lot since then.
Did they take you to the morgue as well, mate, and show you, like, was that part of it as well? Because I know some of the other police I've had on that they did, and then now they don't do that. Were you exposed to that?
Matey, we walked into the morgue and watched, there probably would have been half a dozen autopsies around us. Really interesting. I find dead bodies don't really worry me. Even when you are at accident scenes, when you're picking up body parts, didn't really worry me. Watching somebody cut up a dead body, though, that didn't sit well with me. And I had to walk out a couple of times, at least I would have thrown up on the floor. I think the other thing was that I kind of expected them to be using surgical instruments to do autopsies, not garden tools, not long-handled secateurs. But what was interesting was we had young girls there who'd never done it. They found it fascinating. So there was no if, buts or maybe, but yes, definitely. And what didn't get you, because we're actually in the room, you didn't just get the bodies, you got the smell. You were watching the guy on a break having a cup of tomato soup in the room whilst doing this. It was really confronting back in those days, and I don't know why they don't do it anymore.
And that's what I was going to ask you, mate, was do you think, like, it's set, like, looking back now, do you think it set you up to be, I don't, comfortable's not the right word, but it exposes you to know that you could face these traumas, you know, out on a day-to-day with policing. As you know, these days, some guys I speak to now say, oh, we were really shaken up because that's the first time we'd experienced death. Do you think that, you know, why do you think they got rid of it, mate?
Look, I honestly don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know whether or not there may have been an occupational health and safety angle of it, not just from police getting in, but also from perhaps the coroner's office. There may have been an incident or something that happened there that caused it. I honestly don't know, but I'd been to Varanasi in India, and I'd seen them burning bodies. on the funeral pyres and putting half-burnt bodies into the water. And I remember getting off the train at Varanasi, and there were 3 dead bodies lying on the platform. Somebody obviously owned them, but they'd gone off to get a cup of chai. And there was a constant parade of corpses going down to the burning ghats. So I'd seen that before. I got to see in southern Sudan. I went out, this was in 82 during the Ethiopian refugee crisis, where thousands came over, and some of the kids over there, that was very, very hard to do and very disturbing. But I think all of that certainly prepared me for some of the sites that I was going to see as a policeman. And I did have later on in my career instances where a partner that I had worked with would refuse to come into a house with a dead body in it.
Yeah, right.
And, not much I can do on that. So
No, that's right. And mate, it's you got to react, and you reacted, and it's and that's the thing, that exposure, as I said, it's not, it's not, it's sort of conditioning you for what you're going to face. And when you mentioned that, it was a different time when you joined up back in 1985, and when you had your training, mate, did you feel that you were ready to go out into the the dangerous world of policing, from like you had good instructors, and you felt ready to go out into the on the streets?
It's funny you would say that. I remember my first ever van shift, which was an afternoon shift in Dandenong. So 3 p.m. till 11 p.m, 28 jobs, 8-page running sheet. Never got to have a meal break the entire time. It was just job to job to job to job to job. And I just didn't know what had happened. And the senior connie I was with, at least they were putting fairly experienced senior connies in with me, and like I didn't know what I was meant to be writing. It was very different from the academy, but I think that was the reason why they did the senior, junior, and senior phase training back in those days. You got a taste of what they were teaching you legally and doing all this, but then to apply it practically, now it's far better. The academy's expanded like there's no tomorrow. The facilities are really on par with any other developed nation with their training that they had. But back in those days, of course, there was not a lot. I remember we used to do our firearms training in a tiny little underground. There was only about 4 of us could actually go onto the firing line at one stage, and I think they had to close it down because there was too much lead getting into the air. And it was very good. The instructors that we had, though, were experienced, and they were very good. So at the end of our 2 years of training, yes, you came out of it pretty much knowing what you needed to do. But you really needed that practical on the street stuff combined with what they taught you at the academy.
Do you remember your first arrest, mate?
I did. Guy got into a fight, ran away from me. I took off into pursuit in the dark, went down this alleyway stupidly. I don't know why I should have done that, because his ability to ambush me would have been really friggin' big. And I thought I'd lost him, and I turned around, and there he was just standing there, and he could have grabbed a hunk of wood from behind, hit me over the head, done anything like that. And it gave me a bit of a shock to think I was in pursuit mode. I was going to get him, and not thinking of the dangers, of course.
Yeah, tunnel vision. That tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision, absolute tunnel vision. So, I grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and marched him back, and yeah, we just charged him with a minor offence, and that was it. And it felt pretty good, but looking back on it now, I went, ooh, that wasn't the smartest move I could have done.
And mate, do you remember your first death knock? And was there support back then? And did the support get better as your career went on?
Interesting. So I remembered one of the ones I had, which was a woman who had left was missing. She'd been reported as a missing person and she got found, but she'd been dead for several days in the bush. So decomposition of the body was fairly big, and as were the bugs on her and maggots and flies and all that sort of thing. And we had to go and tell the guy. So you're sort of running through your scenario, and we went up and we knocked on the door, and he answered it, and he said, "Hello, sir." And he said, "Yeah, are you the husband of this lady?" And he said, "Yes, I am." He said, "So you found her, have you?" And we went, "Yes." And he said, "Right then, come on in. Would you like a cup of tea?" And we're on the other end thinking, "What? What?" Okay. And they said, "Okay, could you maybe tell us why you think we're here?" And he said, "Well, I thought that she's been missing and you found her and I'll go pick her up later." And I said, "Not exactly." And we said, "Look, mate, we better sit down." And yeah, he just fell apart, poor guy. And I remember him saying, "I want to see her, I want to see her," and then thinking of what that was going to be like after a week in the bush with the bugs. And I'm going, "Well, listen, you can go to the coroner's court, I'm sure, and you can do that. However, I don't know if that would be the best thing to do, because unfortunately the body is quite decomposed." And so we left him there. But there, that will definitely, because it was a shock when he goes, "You found her, have you?" And we just looked at one another. And I thought, "What?"
Yeah.
And he went, "Yeah." So he thought was thinking he's found her from a missing person, and not that she died.
And that's, mate, it's even like you telling that story, I'm sitting across from you going, that's not a normal reaction to go,
No.
"Yeah, come in. Yeah, would you like a cup of tea?"
No, it completely threw us. And back then, there was nothing. If you went to a fatal accident or if you went to a dead body, there was nothing flagged on the system where you would get a phone call or an email from welfare, nothing like that. If you went back in those days, though, it was just done differently. If you went to a fatal accident with a child where several people had died and it was quite traumatic, then everyone would meet generally down in the detective's room afterwards, and you'd sit around and you'd have a few beers and you'd talk about it. And we found that was probably just as good, or if not better, than doing that. But that seems to not be the case anymore. Now you find that when you finish your shift, you go. There's no longer quite that camaraderie of people being able to sit back and have a beer at work afterwards, because you're not meant to have beer in a police station now. And I think there's a bit lost with that, because you really needed that type of thing. There was a far greater thing after night shift. You would have early openers. You would, get together and decompress afterwards, have a bit of a laugh.
That black humour, it's part of it, isn't it?
Yes, doesn't seem to happen that much anymore.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because, a lot of police veterans I've had on, or other first responders, and I know it myself, we do bring that black humour in, mate, to deal with the traumas that you see. And it's a coping mechanism. It's that way of, and you don't want to bring it home to your family. You just want to be with your crew and talk, or your partner, and just talk about, what the shift. And yeah, it's a shame that, these days it seems to be, well, it, mate, because you've seen it, that it's very different. Policing these days is very different to what it was when you first joined the job, and we'll talk about that a little bit down the track. But you mentioned, mate, that you, after 5 years, you transferred out to the country, and this is where you really found your home, and and I want to bring up your nickname, mate, Trigger. How did you get the nickname Trigger?
Well, yes, great nickname when you're a 6'7" policeman. And I'd like to say that it was as a result of something fairly violent, but unfortunately, if you shorten my surname Tregellas, you get Trig, Trigger, or Trag. And those were my early nicknames when I was a child, which sort of went through. And I found when I went to Portland, there were three of us. All of us were called Mark, and all of us were 6'6" plus. So when somebody walked in and said, "I want to see Mark," and they go, "Which one?" And I go, "The tall one." They go, "Which one?" So having a nickname like Trigger was far easier. That everyone would look at and do. And it was very different. I remember my first job on night shift as a young Connie sent to Portland was to put the crayfish pot in to catch breakfast. I had to go to the end of the pier and toss it off. It was just, yeah. And I'm going, oh, well, I think things are very different here. And it good. There was far more time for the guys to teach you. If there was both TOG and the CIB, sorry, using old term, down in the station at that time, and those guys were great. They would, if you had a problem with a traffic matter, you could go to them. If you had a problem with a crime matter, you'd go to the detectives and just ask their advice, and the guys would give it. It was really good.
So you mentioned, there's a difference between the city policing and the country policing. Are you dealing with, like, obviously you're dealing with different socio-economical status, and you're dealing with different, classes of people, and what was some of the jobs that you were dealing with, in the country compared to, in the city?
Well, I could tell you one story which was fantastic, and this gives you a classic idea. So well, I'll use fake names here, but little Billy, 8 years old, stealing lollies on the way home from school. There's nothing you can do with an 8-year-old stealing lollies except yell at him, try and get his parents to change his ways. So we got Billy in the back of the car, not the first time, driving him home. We pull up outside his property, and it's this dilapidated farmhouse. You've got 3-foot high grass in the front, rusty car bodies, front door hanging off the hinges. It's about 6:30 at night. Why he was out so late, I don't know. So I got Billy by the ear. I'm dragging him in. Don't bother knocking, just walk in. And I can hear voices from the kitchen, so I stick my head round the corner, and there's, we'll call them, say, the Jones family sitting at the dinner table, and Ma Jones was there, so I go, "G'day, Ma." And she looks up and says, "What do you lot want?" And I said, "Well, it's Billy, Ma. We caught him stealing again." She goes, "Oh, I told him. And you go into your talk, you go, "Ma, you know what's going to happen if he keeps this up, don't you? He's going to wind up in prison like his older brother Stephen. I'm looking at this dinner table. There are 6 adults sitting at it. Everyone has food on their plate. There's one old bloke down the end eating. Nobody else is touching their food. There's something. I can't put my finger on it." And Billy sticks his head round the corner. Ma squeals at him, "You get to bed, I'll deal with you later." Poor kid scampers off, and we finish up and go, "All right, well, we're going to go. But if it happens again, straight to prison." Straight to prison. You're not. You just try and get creative. As I turned to leave, the lady sitting next to the old bloke who was eating elbowed him and said, "Hurry up, I'm getting hungry." The old bloke said, "Oh, for crying out loud," dropped his knife and fork, and then, no joke, opened his mouth, takes out his teeth, passes them to her. She puts them in. She starts eating, and that's when it dawns on us, they're waiting for the teeth. True story. Told that story once at an association dinner up in Canberra. Everyone was a little bit leery of it until one of the guys in the table who I'd never met before stuck his hand up and said, "I know that family." Turns out he was a nurse in the hospital in Portland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, their sandwiches the same way.
Mate, this is the thing. You look at that and you see it and you go, the poor kid didn't have it. He had no chance. He had no chance, no hope.
And it's just crazy. A lot of lower socioeconomic people living there. And you got to remember, I was raised in Melbourne, so I was a suburbs boy. So my first trip into the country was a little bit of a eye-opener for myself as well. Even though I loved it and I thrived in it, there was certain things that happened to me that were just like I was just not expecting.
Oh, well, we're gonna talk about some of these stories in a minute. But there's one chapter in your book, and I'll plug it now. Is backup is 3 hours away, and there's a chapter called Horse, mate. Can you talk me through the chapter on horse? I had a good laugh.
Oh, look, it's I got to admit there are some chapters on the book that are hilarious, and this was certainly one of them. So back in the back in the early 90s, when you got sent to a country station, there was accommodation. Portland had 12 flats and homes available to police members that were owned by the state government, and you could rent them at 6%. And that was an incentive to get guys to go to the country. But when I went there, there was a guy and he was sick. I think he might have had cancer. And so they said, listen, can you for a while think of to go somewhere else? And I said, do you know anywhere? And they said, oh, look, yeah, there's this house at a beach about 25k away. And they said, it's really old, but it's only $75 a week rent. And I went, $75 a week? I'm there. So I went out to this house, which was pretty much next to a beach, and it was 100 years old. This house was so old when the wind blew, the wallpaper used to come out about 2 feet. It had an outdoor toilet and a semi-detached shower that was part of a walled-in section of the veranda. So on my first morning, I walked naked out the front door because I could, and into the walled-in section of the veranda, and then into the room set up as a bathroom. It was never meant to be a bathroom. There was a one of those enamelled cast iron tubs on 4 legs with a wraparound curtain and a toilet, and there was no extractor fan there, but the bath was pushed against the far wall where there was this 4-foot wide lap sash window that you could drop down. That would let the steam out. So I worked that out, and I'm in the shower shampooing. What I didn't know was that there was a horse in the paddock next to the shower that heard the water and walked over. And the horse looks through the window and goes, water. I think I'll have a drink. So it sticks its head through the window and proceeds to drink out of the shower. Now, this was 6 inches in front of my face. I'm completely oblivious to it because my eyes are closed because I'm shampooing. And then the horse turns around, looks at me, and obviously says to itself, gee, I wonder what that white stuff tastes like. Let me tell you, getting licked in the face by a horse when you're naked in a shower is exciting. In fact, it's so exciting, it bears detail. The lick goes in, and with the tongue pretty much still attached, your eyes open. And in the split second before the suds hit them and they close, the only thing you focus on is this massive set of teeth 6 inches in front of your face, and a horse is not the first thing that comes to mind seeing as you're naked in the shower. But the first thing that does come to mind is the monster from the Aliens movie. Yeah. So you exit the shower, taking the rod and the curtain with you. I exited so fast I hit the far wall. How I never killed myself beyond me. But after a while, I got used to the horse, and occasionally I'd shampoo the horse's face as well. So the only problem with living out at White's Beach was the exorbitant rent. So I got young John Arden, another young Connie at the time, to move in with me, and we'd split the rent, and that made it, and that was far better. So on John's first morning, he's sitting in the kitchen, having a cup past him out the front door. So John's head comes around the corner and he goes, Trig. And I've gone, yeah, mate. And then he says, where are you going? And I've gone, shower. And then he looks a little bit worried, and he looks at me and he says, why do you have a large carrot in your hand? And fair question. I often shower with a carrot, to which point he looks even more disturbed and says, and what do you do in the shower with a carrot? And I said, you'll find out soon enough. So a couple of hours later, he has a shower, meets the horse. And in a couple of hours, yeah, we're both showering with carrots. So,
mate, Mate, I had a great laugh at that chapter because it's just not what you expect is, to be having a shower and then all of a sudden a horse is in the shower almost with you. And I loved it how you brought in the girlfriend and you heard, like, not your girlfriend, but you heard
later on.
the scream.
John had this. John was very good looking. He had a lot of girlfriends. And I thought he was in Melbourne one night when he, in fact, had come home. And I got up early morning and was having some muesli. And I looked out the front window and there was this hare sitting about 80 metres away. And I thought, I don't have anything for dinner. I reckon a hare would be great. So I went and got the 222 out of the safe and lined up on the kitchen table, opened up the window, made certain no one was, anywhere near me and bench rested off the kitchen table and let fly all around. And I hit the hare, but I'd never fired a shot inside a house before, and it's loud. It was nowhere near as loud as a scream that came from John's room because he had come back earlier and I didn't know it, and he was getting to know the new girlfriend. And anyway, there's a stomp of feet and the door flies open and there's John standing there stark naked, right, covered in sweat. And I'm sort of like at eye level, which was just the worst possible view in front of me. And he had no idea what had gone wrong. So I finished chewing on my muesli and I looked at him and I go, I got it. And he just storms off. Comes back in about 15 minutes and I apologised. I said, look, mate, I'm really sorry. I would nowhere known would I set off around in the house if I'd known you were, here. And he said, oh, look, don't worry about it. And I said, well, what's the new girlfriend like? Is she really good? Do I get to meet her? And he said, yeah, sure. She's just having a shower. And less than 5 seconds later, there's this scream and another tromp of feet, and the door flies open again, and here's this 25-year-old woman covered in soap suds, stark naked, standing in the door frame. She turns around, points, and goes, "There's a horse in the shower." And John and I just both look at the bowl of carrots in the middle.
Oh, mate. Well, I mean, mate, you got a couple of sights that day. I mean, one you didn't want to see, but the other one,
I was about 26 years old. It was great.
Oh, mate, wow. And that, mate, I was in stitches. I was just like, wow, that is such a great, and country policing. Country policing. It has everything, mate.
Naked women, horses in the shower,
and carrots, mate. Carrots. When I started reading that, I was like, and the way you wrote it, Trig, it was like, I was like, hang on. What do you mean? You're taking a carrot? What are you doing with a carrot? And then it made sense. I was like, that's what you're doing. You're feeding the horse, and it's
exactly. The horse was there every shower. He was waiting for the carrot. Oh, so weird to be showering and shampooing and scratching the face of a horse at the same time.
Yeah, no, it was, mate. It was, and I highly recommend to the listeners, mate. Get out and buy Trig's book. It is brilliant, and there's so many stories throughout the book like that. But mate, I want to talk about there was one chapter, and it was the dirty yellow van job. Let's talk about that job.
Okay, so this goes to show you exactly what it was like being by yourself. So this happened at the end of my career. I was stationed for 16 years in Mallacoota. And Mallacoota, for listeners that don't know, is in Victoria, on the coast, just before the New South Wales border. But it is the most remote country town on the coast between Townsville in Queensland and the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, when you take into account distance to hospitals, fuel, that type of thing. And a lot of the time you are the only policeman within hours of being able to get there. So one day I'm working by myself. It's at night, and I got a radio message from D24 saying, "Trig, we got a job for you. Can you start heading out to the highway?" And I said, yep, no worries. So I'm travelling out to the highway and I said, what have you got? They said, well, we got a dirty yellow van with 5 offenders on board. They've done multiple thefts and petrol drive-offs from Bairnsdale Lakes, New Morella. Then they've stolen a stuffed kangaroo from the Bellbird Hotel. And they're heading to you. You're the only cop between them and the border. And I went, okay. Can you give the pub at Can River a call? And see if they can spot them going past, because if they go up the Monaro Highway, I'll miss them. If they come through to Genoa, I'll get them. And he said, sure. So I kept travelling. And then when I arrived on the Princess Highway, I had just had a phone call from the pub. They're headed your way. I said, fabulous. Back up. And they go, there's no one within 3 hours of you. I go, where is everyone? They said, oh, well, the greenies are going off up at Gullangook. I went, oh, for crying out loud. So then I picked up the New South Wales radio, because when you're a policeman on the border, you're a policeman in both states. You have special constable status in New South Wales. You have to be sworn in by a magistrate, and that gives you the ability to pursue across the border. So you have a New South Wales car radio in your car as well. I think we had about 8 radios when you consider being this remote, everything from HF to UHF, VHF. There was a lot of radios. And so I got on the radio and said, can someone give me some backup? And Eden came up, which is an hour away, and they said, we can back you up, but we're not in Eden. I said, where are you? They said, Bega. It was another half hour on top of that. So I went, well, can you start heading my way? I've got 5 offenders coming at me. And they said, sure thing. So I thought I'd stay in Genoa, because there's nothing between Genoa and Can River except forest. So the longer it took them to get to me, the quicker I'd be able to get back up from Eden. 40 minutes later, a dirty yellow van drives past. So I pull out behind it, and then it was quite a well-lit night. So I drive along, then I turn my headlights on, and I'm checking the rego, because I had 2 partial registration. They have these words spray painted onto the back of the van: police, do not follow me. You make me nervous. And I'm looking at it going, what? And I'm thinking, surely you're not going to be committing crimes and having that on the back of your van. And then I thought, can't quite get my head around this. So I thought, well, I guess I'm going to make them nervous. So I put the red light, blue and red lights on. They pull over. I'm giving my location to D24 as to where I am. And I look up, and these 2 young girls get out of the cabin and walk back towards me. And I can't work this out. So I get out of the cabin, and the 2 girls walk over to me, and one of them walks over to me and says, in a very thick German accent, hello, I'm Yvonne and I'm Suzanne. We're from Germany. And I looked at him and I thought, German backpacker chicks. I'm tipping this ain't my van. Hi, girls, how's your night going? They went, yeah, it is very good, but for what reason did you pull us over? I said, you wouldn't believe it, but your van matches the description of one full of criminals that are wanted by the police. She looks at me and goes, no. These criminals, they are violent, yeah? I went, yeah. She goes, oh, this is so exciting. I love Australia. And for some reason, at that particular point in mind, that scene from Austin Powers, where he has the 2 Japanese twins standing in front of him, and he reaches into his notebook, pulls it out, and at the back, things to do before I die, have sex with Japanese twins. Well, I'm thinking German backpackers. And I go, so girls, you're excited. And just as I say that, guess what drives past? Another dirty yellow van.
Oh,
so
no.
I go, oh, sorry, girls, got to go. So I jump in the truck and take off after this van. Pull up behind it, check the rego, matches a partial drive off from the pub. So I go, great, I've got my van. However, we're getting close to the border, and I have to pull them over before I get to the border, because if I pull them over after, I can't bring them back. It's an extradition. And if I pursue them over the border, I've got to get permission to continue the pursuit from the New South Wales pursuit controllers. So I throw blueies on, they pull over, I pull over, I'm giving my location again. Anyway, this 25-year-old guy gets out covered in tattoos, acting very squirrely. There's heads bobbing around in the back of the van. I'm sitting here going, I don't like this. I got to think of something. What am I going to do? And so I pick up the loudspeaker, the tannoy, and crank up the volume and press the button. I go, occupants of the van, listen carefully. This is the police, just in case they didn't know what the blue and red lights were for. Your van's been identified as being wanted for a number of crimes in the East Gippsland region. You're all considered dangerous. Don't do anything stupid. So the guy standing out the front suddenly goes and just puts his hand straight up in the air. I don't know, he must have thought I had him barreled or something. And I think, oh, that's pretty good. I go, lift up his shirt. So he lifts up his shirt and I go, turn around. He gets halfway around. Who drives past? It's the German backpacker chicks. Yvonne is hanging out the passenger window with a video recorder strapped to her eye and a right fist raised into the air, screaming into the night, "Yeah, gets him, gets him." This kid's jaw just hits the floor. And I start giggling and I get on the loudspeaker and I go, "Have a good trip, Yvonne. Okay, mate, drop your shirt, grab your license, come back and see me. Everyone else stay in the van." So this guy walks back and he looks at me and he goes, "What was with the other van?" I go, "Oh, mate, German backpacker chicks. Don't worry about it." "What's with all the crime?" He goes, "What crime?" I go, "The petrol drive-offs, the thefts, Bairnsdale, Lakes, New Morella." He looks at me and goes, "We haven't stopped in any of those places." I go, "Well, what about the kangaroo?" He goes, "Oh, from the pub." I go, "Yeah, that's right, the pub." He goes, "Oh, look, we just drove up 50 yards and tossed it out again. We just wanted to piss him off, that's all." And I'm thinking, oh, I think there's a fence in there somewhere. "Got a license?" "Yeah." "Have you got it on?" "No." "Have you got it on you?" "No." So anyway, I've got my notebook out and I'm writing down his details, and then I look up and there's two guys walking towards the police car from the direction of the van. Both of them look mean and they're carrying baseball bats. And Leon, the kid I'm talking to, looks up, sees them, turns to me and says, "Who are those two guys?" And I look at him and I go, "They're not with you." And he goes, "I've never seen them before." And I'm thinking, bullshit. It's got to be bullshit. And like, it's one of the few times I've had like a pistol out and my spray in the other hand, because I have no idea what is going on.
And you're on your own.
And I'm on my own. And I'm thinking, what? Yeah, these guys were just walking along and decided to help me out carrying baseball bats. And I'm like, I just can't do it. So about 10 yards away, older bloke in front stops, turns around, hands his baseball bat to the younger guy, and then he walks up past me, straight up to Leon, where he grabs him by his shirt front, pulls him into him and says, "Where's me fucking kangaroo?" And then it dawns on me, it's the publican with the pissed son-in-law, and they've thrown the baseball bats in the car. They're in hot pursuit. They've driven past. My head was down writing down his details. I didn't see them drive past. They've pulled in front of the yellow van, and because their car was narrower than the van, I couldn't see it being directly behind it, not until I went out 2 feet and looked further up. And I'm sitting there going, oh, my God, I can't believe this. But then the four guys in the back of the van see Leon getting shirt fronted. They all pile out and it's on for young and old. My controlled intercept's just gone to the shitter. So I'm on the radio giving little excerpts like everything out of control, one person out at a time, to two guys just rolled up with baseball bats, to 7 guys having an argy-bargy. This is turning pear-shaped. So the only good thing about any... So I look down at my little can of spray and think, nah, that's just not going to cut it. So I walk up to the back of the van and I pull out the 2 party packs of OC foam
which are like fire extinguisher size. And I wander over, and at the top of my voice, I say, "Everyone shut up and calm down, or I'm spraying everyone." And Leon turns to me and goes, "Oh, don't do that, man. I've had that before. That really hurts." So but everyone stops fighting. And Leon and the publican talking, and the publican's upset about his kangaroo. And Leon goes, "Mate, if you're that worried about your kangaroo, we'll pay for it." And I go, "Hang on a minute. You're going to pay for it?" He goes, "Yeah." So I go to the publican, "Do you want to press charges?" And the publican says, "Well, not if he's going to pay for it." There's my theft out the window. So I said, "Okay." To the publican, "You take your brother-in-law, go back, sit in the car. You four morons, go back, sit in the van. Leon, still need to see some ID." Leon turns to me and goes, "This has been the weirdest night of my life." And I've gone, "It's coming close to mine too, Leon." So anyway, the publican and his son go back, get in the car, turn around and drive off. And me and Leon are just watching them. And Leon turns to me and he goes, "They're pissed." And I go, "No, they're not. They're shit-faced." He goes, "Aren't you going to stop them?" I've gone, "Nah," because I'm still tipping I got my van. 15 minutes later, Eden roll up. We search the van. I found a girl in the back.
Oh.
Crazy. Anyway, after all of our searching and everything else, guess what? It's not them. There was a third yellow van driving round East Gippsland at the same time, on the same night, also with 5 guys on board, different make and model, didn't find that out till the next day, but they were the ones committing all the petrol thefts and the drive-offs. They weren't swapping number plates. It was 2 separate vans. The only thing these guys had done was the kangaroo, and the guy doesn't want to press charges. I've got nothing. So by this stage, I've got half of East Gippsland glued to the radio, wanting to know what happened. And I come up with, Malakuta 303 with a reply, and they're expecting, 5 offenders strapped to the front bull bar, driving back and charging everyone with everything. And I said, "Yeah, mark mine last. Inquiries pending for a possible penalty notice." And then there's this pause and the operator says, "Trigger, how did you turn a crime spree into a penalty notice?" And I go, "Well, it wasn't easy, but I managed it." So in hindsight, I'd have been far better off sticking with the German backpacker chicks. I might have had a far better outcome out of that, but I'm thinking that's only in my.
I think so, mate. I think, and this is country policing. What are the chances of 3 yellow vans that are all dirty in the one night? Like it's just, you wouldn't script it. You
cannot make up this stuff. It's just not possible.
Oh, mate, I had a good chuckle there, and that was another great chapter, and mate, that's just, yeah, all right, we're going to have, there's going to be a rap sheet as long as your arm, and no, just wait out, we've just got a penalty notice, like... Oh, mate, just wild. And this is why we do the podcast, to show the public this is policing. This is how this is what it's like. And mate, I want to talk about, there's a day in the book also you talk about, a day you never forget, mate, is the day you were shot in the face. Can you talk to us on this day? What happened?
That's actually had a bit of new news, which
right.
I was only just kind of made aware of it. So what happened was, I think back then every 6 months we had to do OS training, which was unarmed tactics, the latest legal problems or laws that had been changed that we had to know, and also to qualify the pistol. So there was about 5 officers who were on the firing line at the Bairnsdale Pistol Club. And I was because I was the only left-handed shooter, I was on the far left, and then all the other shooters were to my right. We had brand new targets with no holes in them, and we were 5 metres from the target. So the course of fire was at the beep to draw and fire 4 rounds onto the target. in, I think it was 2 seconds or something. So, or in our own time, I think it was, which meant you could take a little bit extra time to aim at the target. So I remember drawing, and back then it was Smith & Wesson Model 10s. It was 38 special was the caliber, and it was 165 grain lead slugs that they were firing. So I remember drawing, firing 4 rounds onto the target, and then lowering the revolver to a 45-degree angle, which was what you were meant to do. And I was just standing there when all of a sudden, massive smack in the front of my face. And it felt like someone had hit me in the face with a baseball bat. And I reeled back, and everything kind of went dark. And I staggered and went down on one knee, and I almost blacked out. All these sparkles started sort of coming back within my vision range, and I sort of stood up, but everyone had noticed me fall or semi-fall. And so the range controller came over to me and looked at me and said, "What happened?" And then I said, "I don't know." And then all of a sudden he changed from looking at my face to looking at my shirt, and I looked down and I just had blood pumping out my nose. And that's when they had the realisation that I'd been shot. So he grabbed one arm, another policeman grabbed another. They walked me back and sat me down, and blood was pumping out a fair bit, and they didn't know what had happened. So they basically said, "Look, range closed. Give me your firearm." So, and then he's handed my firearm to one of the detectives that was on the line with me, and he said, "I'm going to take Trig straight to hospital, try and work out what happened." So what the detective did was he opened up the cylinder on my revolver and saw that there were 6 rounds, 4 of them had been fired, and then he was able to walk up to my target and see 4 holes in the cardboard. And then he did that to every other person on the firing line until he got to the far right, which was a sergeant at the time, and again opened up the revolver, 6 rounds in it, 4 had been fired. He went up 3 rounds on the target, but then on the upper right-hand side, which was the metal bracket that was holding the targets, there was a brand shiny new spot where the round had hit, and it had ricocheted straight back. So the round drove in about an inch below the ridge line of my nose, drove up my nasal cavity, hit the cartilage between my eyes, and stopped. If it had been front on, I wouldn't be here today. I was rushed to Bairnsdale Base Hospital, and I was put on to the CT scanner, and they found that one of my best mates at the time, his mother, whom I knew, worked at radiology. And it was lunchtime when we got there, so the guys in the radiology room are having a meat pie or something. So anyway, they've scanned me, and then as I walked out, the guy stuck his head around the corner. He goes, "Hey, Trig, come and have a look at this." And there's this CT scan of my head with a bullet lodged basically between my eyes. And I remember my jaw just dropping, and like, I was lying down on the CT scanner still bleeding into the bucket. And, when I get up, I'm walking around holding my nose to stop blood. And he looked at it and he said, "That's awesome. Can you feel anything?" And I went, I can't feel a thing from the neck up. And I walked back to the range controller and he said, what's the story? And I said, "There's a bullet lodged between my eyes." And the look on his face was, and he just said, "What, the whole thing?" And I went, "Yeah." And then like immediately after, this old guy came in and looked at the x-ray, and then he said, "Tilt your head back." And he just shone a torch up my nose and he said, "We'll do you now." And then the range controller gets on the phone. I'll never forget it. he's on the phone and he goes, "There's been an accident at the range. Member shot. They're operating to remove the bullet." And the phone starts ringing back, and it's getting higher and higher up the chain of command, I tell you. And so I'm then sitting on a trolley, and I'm being rushed into surgery. And I remember this guy walk up to me eating a sandwich. And he walks up to me, takes a bite and has a couple of munches, and he goes, "G'day." And I go, "G'day." He goes, "Oh, I'm your anaesthetist. How much do you weigh?" And I said, "Oh, about 100 kilo. He goes, "Right." Takes another bite. "Ever had a general before?" I said, "Yeah, actually. Apparently I'm easy to eat. I don't have any problems with that." He goes, "Good." So finishes the sandwich, goes, "Right, clothes off on the scales." And then he goes, "Follow me." We walk into the operating theatre. That's not ready. They've still got the girls are rushing out all of the gear. They're not even draped with the green cloths and stuff that they have. And he goes, "Right, jump up on the table." So I'm lying on the operating table and he starts tapping my vein to cannulate me. And I remember looking up and seeing crumbs from his sandwich on his shirt. And I remember thinking, I do not have a problem with that. If obviously they feel they have to pull their finger out, that's what antibiotics are for. So he said, "Right, sorry, got to paralyse you. We're working on the face. Do you have any questions?" And I went, "Yes, can I make a phone call?" And he went, "Oh," hands me his personal mobile phone. I'm on the operating table. I phone up my wife, who's 6 months pregnant with our first in Apollo Bay. And I went, "Hi, hun." "Oh, good. Hey, bet you can't guess what happened to me today." And she goes, "What's that?" "Oh, listen, I was on the range and I copped a bit of a ricochet, and look, they've got to I'm in the hospital and they've got to, sort of get it out. So I'm all right though." Didn't say that I'd been shot between the eyes. Didn't land that one up. So anyway, of course, the fact that I'm being operated on, it was about a 3-hour operation. They went back and they didn't know that I'd called my wife. So they've gone through their own stuff. So 2 of the guys I worked with for, it was Colin, I think Pete, and both these guys I'd worked with for 5 years. They very nervously come up, knocking on the door, and there's Kate, 6 months pregnant, and they've gone, "Hi." and Kate said you could just tell they were nervous as hell. And she said, "You happen to hear anything about Trig today?" And Kate said, yes. He says it's fine. He's phoned me from the hospital, and she said you could just see this absolute relief come onto their faces at the time. So anyway, the surgeons had to operate because one of the blood loss, 2 of the upper airways, and 3 because of infection. Could have occurred if they didn't take it out. So anyway, the next day I woke up and I stayed in overnight, and the next day they came in, they said, "Listen, the operation went really well. You do not know how lucky you were." They said, "If that bullet had landed an inch in any other direction, we'd have been having a whole different conversation. And if it had gone in an eye or an open mouth or a throat," they said, "nah, you wouldn't have been here." Believe it or not, the cartilage between your eyes is designed to absorb impact. And that's the only thing that stopped that bullet going in. So just absolutely fantastic. They did offer to fly Kate up to Bairnsdale in the police helicopter, but she gets car sick, let alone air sick, and with a baby didn't want to live it. So, look, they said there's going to be off for a while, but there's no reason why we have to keep you in here in hospital. So one of my mates, Stu, he drove me from Bairnsdale through to Apollo Bay on the night. Since then, I have to say, complications due to the damage that was done. And I kept getting headaches, and a year later, they did another scan and found a piece that they'd missed. So they went back in and got that out. But then 10 years after that, when I started having sleep difficulties, and my GP said, well, listen, we better give you a sleep test, because it may not be PTSD. It could be sleep apnea, which was a good call on his part. So I went and had that, and the guy just took one look and said, no, this is as a result of a trauma. Have you had a trauma? I said, well, before or after they took the bullet out. And next thing you know, I'm standing in front of an ear, nose and throat specialist, and he's sticking a camera up my nose, and he says, oh, I can tell why you can't breathe. So they reconstructed my whole upper respiratory airways, straightened my septum. I had polyps growing all through my sinus cavities that they had to get rid of. So now I have a nasal spray. I'll be on that for the rest of my life. There is a possibility that I may need a fourth operation as a result of it, but I never did it. But the reason why I was saying that something recent, I got a phone call from from the superintendent of the region, and he said that he's had a file produced in regards to the accident, and he wants to know if I can get a statement from my GP on the circumstances of the bullet wound and also the seriousness of it. And I said, yeah, sure, I can do that for you, boss. So I went to my GP, because when I went through work cover, I got all of the medical records. So I had the surgical notes, I had everything. So I was able to give them to my GP to say that this is what I've been asked for. Can you possibly write me a letter? And she did. But the letter shocked me, because from what she could tell from the surgical notes, it was a lot more serious than what I had thought it was. And I think that when you get injured, I think there's a tendency of people to minimise the damage done, where you go, oh, nah, she's right. There's not, it's not that bad. Shortly, I got whacked in the nose. She's all right. But when I actually read the report from her, she said that, and I spoke to her, because I'm now off on work cover on a pension. I still have to see her every 3 months to get a certificate of capacity. And I spoke to her about it, and I said, listen, it shocked me a bit, because you said that it was a very serious injury. And she herself said, what, you think you get rushed into surgery for something minor? You don't. It was a bullet wound, and you've got, all your upper respiratory airways been damaged. You're bleeding. You've got that. He says, no, it was very, very serious. And it made me rethink the whole thing slightly. And I got to admit, it came as a little bit of a shock, because I think I'd convinced myself that it was an injury, but it wasn't too bad. But she came back and said, no, your injury was life-threatening. And I'm kind of glad I found that out now, many years after, rather than at the time, because I think it would have affected me far worse if I'd known back then, and that you're better off not knowing.
And we're going to talk about your PTSD and your retirement a little bit further down the track. But isn't it amazing, mate, that it's amazing what the brain forgets with trauma, and it just compartmentalize, push that back. And mate, you're just a normal day on the range, and you almost died.
Well, everyone, you know, like, and you're talking about that dark humour where everyone says, well, if you hadn't been 6'7", the bullet would have gone clean over your head and you wouldn't be here, would you? And, you know, like the poor guy who shot me, he was a bit distraught about it because it was an accident on his behalf. Pulled up at the station outside the old Bairnsdale police station. Someone wound down the window and yelled out, "Murderer." And he actually chucked a bit of a wobbly and one of the guys did it. But I still get to see him occasionally and he still says to me, "Trig, long time, no shoot." And I can now think back, you know, I can now laugh about it because it's no use dwelling on what could have been if it had just been, you know, a few millimetres in any other direction.
Mm. And that's, mate, as you say, we joke about it now, but it's an accident. It's not like he intentionally, you know, set out to harm you that day. It's a freak accident that, mate, it's a blessing, mate, that you're still here. It's a blessing that you're still
without
here.
a doubt. And, you know, I've counted up the number of operations from injuries and I just passed 13. I've had 13 and we're talking spinal operations. I've had 3 on my spine, 5 on my knee, 3 on the bullet wound, 1 on my shoulder, 1 on my elbow from injuries that I had. I got out of the commandos because I thought I wouldn't get injured as much in the police force. What friggin' happened? I wound up having far greater injuries than that. But
if you had stayed in defence, mate, you might have been better looked after than what
I might have been better looked after if I'd been from there. But I've had, you know, other things, you know, adhesive iriditis, which are complications from spinal surgery. Peripheral neuropathy now has come out as a result of that. So I'll be on medications and that for the rest of my life. But it's nice to know that at least every one of those operations and that were as a result of injuries on duty and are covered by work cover.
Absolutely, and
which is good.
Yeah, and mate, just when I read that in the book, I was like, Trig gets shot in the face and he's still, you know, and the bullet lodges in between his eyes and like that's as close as it comes. And yeah, like it's as you said, millimeters either side, and
another inch deeper,
we wouldn't be having this conversation, mate. So you know, it's just a wild. It just goes to show, mate, just how how crazy policing is. That it wasn't even an offender; it was, you know, just a range shoot, and how quickly, you know, it can escalate to go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly, and how it escalates very, very quickly, and you know, just a normal day and an environment that is controlled, and yeah, that happens, and just.
I shut down every police range in the whole of Victoria until they removed any ricochetable materials from it. So now every time after that, it was just sort of 2B1 wood that were holding the targets and not metal.
Yeah, and lessons learnt, mate, the hard way. But through, and just as I said, very, very, mate, count your blessings that you're still here. And mate, I want to talk about another, as we mentioned at the start of the podcast, you received the Clarke Silver Medal from the Royal Humane Society. Can you tell the listeners what the Royal Humane Society does, and can you talk us through the day that you were awarded this medal?
Sure. So the Royal Humane Society is an institution that began in 1874, and back then, and we're talking about not Australia, we're talking about the colony of Victoria. So we're talking about colonial times before Australia became Australia, and back then there was no recognition for bravery. The only thing they had back then was not many of them given out these days.
Sorry, Trig, we just lost you there, mate. You cut in, mate. So
sorry, that's okay. So back before 1874, the only medal that was ever given was one called the Bushranger Medal, and there's not very many of them given out these days. But that was to, you know, obvious police officers that we're doing. But for civilians, there was absolutely nothing. So after a series of what were back then ships that had got, and people were saved off them, they realised that they should do or copy the Royal Humane Society from England, which is recognition by civilians of bravery in saving the lives of others. So it was formed in 1874, and then Australia became Australia, and then in the early 1900s they changed from, of course, a few years after the Royal Humane Society of Victoria was instigated. New South Wales, of course, they had to have one as well, so they became the Royal Humane Society of New South Wales. But then Victoria changed in 1908, I think it was, to the Royal Humane Society of Australasia, which included Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. And so it operates as a charity on a board of people. You'll find that the Governor General is normally the patron to it, and then you'll have ambulance officers, police. Normally the Police Chief Commissioner will be one of not on the board, but as an expert to be able to give an idea as to what level of award should be given. So they have three main award levels, which are a medal given in gold, silver or bronze based on the level of danger that was faced. They also have a separate medal to recognise if someone has died, saving another person's life. But then they also have a certificate where it's worthy of recognition, but is not enough for them to give a medal. And then what happened was a little bit after that, I can't remember the exact date, but Australia have a few baronets. So a baronet sits above a sir, but below a lord in the English hierarchical system. And a baronet was Rupert Clarke. And there is a statue in Spring Street of Sir Rupert Clarke, who was there, who was the only baronet, I think, in Victoria at the time. I think there's a few up in New South. And it's when you become, when you're knighted and become a sir, it does not pass down to your son, but a baronet does. So at the moment, there's the 13th baronet, Clarke, in Victoria. And he realised that he wanted to look at recognising over the year a specialist medal. So he instigated, and where this came across, I think most people would be aware of the Great Ocean and of the Lockhart Gorge wreck story, whereby a storm destroyed a boat that was going past, and into the Lockhart Gorge was a young sailor, and he landed there, but then he heard screams, and it was a passenger, a young girl, who he then swam out and rescued and came in and saved. There were only two who survived out of the entire ship, the Lockhart, that went down. And so he climbed up out of the Lockhart Gorge, walked along, and then found a guy on a horseback who was in a local farm, and then they got people in. And he realised that this was something that was exceptionally brave, to have come in exhausted, drained in heavy seas, but then to go out again to save this young lass. There was the newspapers all wanted them to fall in love and get married and all this sort of thing, but it never happened. She went back to Ireland, I think it was, and he wound up going somewhere else. But Sir Rupert Clarke instigated the Clarke Medal, which is given either in silver or gold, and it is given once a year to the Bravery Award, which is deemed to be the hardest for that entire year. So if you were given a gold medal, then you would get the Clarke Gold Medal. If you were given a silver medal, you were given a Clarke Silver Medal. But sometimes it's not given at all. And I think a few times it's been given to two recipients at the time. So in the 150 years since it's been going, I was the third recipient to get it. I think the first was in 1926 and the other one was in 1946. So from 1946 to 2006, that was me. I believe there has been a fourth now as well.
Right.
That has been given to that. So absolutely incredible. So it's given in a private ceremony by the Governor-General, and you have your media, your family and friends can be there. So I was, and it was given at the Melbourne Town Hall, and I'm like getting dressed up in my uniform, and I'm in a room by myself, and I'm thinking, this is surreal. It's like, you got to be joking. Like, you know, in the room next door, I've got family, friends. Sir Rupert Clarke was there. I've got the Chief Commissioner of Police. I've got media with television cameras, and they're all here for me. And you're almost having what they call like survivor guilt, whereby you're thinking, gee, you know, at the time, the incident that led to me being awarded this, the last thing I was thinking about would have been standing here waiting for the Governor-General to arrive. At the time, I was absolutely shitting myself, and I thought I was going to die. And it's a very, very emotional time to get that. Like, it was just stunning. And then you've got the Governor-General reads and it was Quentin Bryce, who was the Governor-General at the time, amazing lady. And, you know, she's reading out what happened on that day, and you're sitting there trying not to cry. And, you know, I had nightmares for a long time after that job that I went to that was resulted in me being awarded this. And I realised afterwards that, you know, those nightmares had been pretty much replaced by getting to meet the Governor-General and the look on my daughter's faces when I was getting this award. And it was undoubtedly the highlight of my career.
And for the civilian listener, mate, does the Clarke Medal, does it run beside? So, you know, we've got now the Cross of Valour, and we've got the George. We had the George
Yep.
Cross, and, you know, the Commendation for Bravery. And does the Clarke Medal run beside like what those bravery medals are?
So it's different. There are, in Australia now today, you have the National Bravery Decorations. Now, up until 1976, they were imperial ones: George Cross, George Medal, King or Queen's Gallantry Medal, that were given out to police. But in 1975, and then sort of ran into 76, the Australian Honours and Awards system for bravery came in. And so you have the Cross of Valour, which is the equivalent to, it's the civilian version of the Victoria Cross for Australia. Only 5 of them have ever been awarded. You have the Star of Courage. About 200 of them have been awarded. You have the Bravery Medal, and about 2,000 of them have been awarded. And then you have a Commendation for Brave Conduct, and about 4,000 of them have been awarded. There's also a group bravery citation if you're with a group of people that can be done. So when you do the stats, 0.0003% of Australians receive a bravery decoration. Many, many more receive Orders of Australia. The bravery decorations are extremely rare, but the federal bravery decorations are not the only bravery decorations that are given out. Each state department, for example, Victorian Police, the SES, the CFA or Fire Rescue Victoria, they have their own bravery medals. In Victorian Police, you have the Medal for Courage and you have the Valour Award. But there are also independent organisations, and there are 3 of them that can give awards to civilians for brave acts. You have the Royal Humane Society of Australasia, which is undoubtedly the oldest and most well known. You have the Royal Life Saving Society. They have their awards. And you also have St John's Life Saving Medal. And St John's Life Saving Medal is rare. There have only been 11 awarded. And the last award was in 79, I think. Now, to people to be awarded those, it kind of depends. Anyone can put anyone in for a National Bravery decoration. So if you have somebody who you look at, and I would have to say, for example, I would lay money that Ahmed, from the guy who tackled the gunman at Bondi Beach, I would say there would probably be more than one award being put in for him to receive a National Bravery decoration. But if other people wish to put him in for the Royal Humane Society Award, a Royal Life Saving Award, or even a St John's Award, then you would find that they can do that. So it is possible for people to receive more than one award for the same event, but not often. Normally it's just there. I make no real difference. The Royal Humane Society its history is so rich. And when you look at the awards that it has given out over 150 years is just amazing. There was I remember there was one of the awards was given to a man who ran onto train tracks and out of the way because she'd been caught in the train tracks, and the train was going so fast that it hit him in the foot and knocked his boot off. That's how close it was. But here's the history. The train was carrying the police that were going to Glenrowan to arrest Ned Kelly.
Wow.
So there's all these, it's part of Australia, the history, and it's an amazing society. I was absolutely honoured recently to be the guest speaker at their 150th anniversary, and it was an amazing experience to go up and to meet people in Melbourne and to meet the directors that were there, and you know it was amazing for me to get up, and it was quite cathartic to have to get up and to relive people what it was like for me to win the award that I did.
And I think you've actually got a recording of that, don't you? And I was actually going to ask you if we could actually put that at the start of the podcast, mate.
If you wish, I can give you a recording of that speech I gave, and I'm more than happy to let you put that on the podcast, matey.
Absolutely. No, I think it's very, mate. It was I've heard it. I've heard that recording through a good friend of ours, and mate, I actually listened to you, and I had tears in my eyes. It was that moving. The way you spoke and how proud you were, and you know, talking of your awarding of the Clarke Medal, mate. I had tears. I haven't told you this, but I had tears in my eyes.
Mate, it was one of the hardest speeches I think it was the hardest speech that I've ever written. Took me weeks to put it down and to try to do it, and you're getting up and I'm giving a talk, and absolutely no one's saying anything. Like, there was dead silence, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, are people going to sleep listening to this, or what are they doing? And it was just amazing. And then after I gave the speech, and you know, there was a round of applause. It just blew me away, and I had people coming up to me afterwards saying, wow, that really. And I had to give, like, the Assistant Commissioner of Police was there, and I'm talking about my whole career as a police officer there, and I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't think badly of me from doing this. But he came up afterwards and said that was just fantastic, and it's been really good. I'm now working on my second book. My second book is very different. It's titled Courage Under the Badge. And I'm going to list every single Victorian police officer that has been awarded a bravery decoration from all of those organisations I spoke of before, and also to write a book on those who have given the ultimate sacrifice and died in the line of duty. And I recently went to the funeral of Michael Pratt, and
Yes.
Michael, Australia's last living recipient of the George Cross.
Yep, a lovely man that I knew personally, mate, and I was only, if it hadn't have been for his illness, mate, we were actually going to record his podcast. We just ran out of time.
Man.
And he said to me that I'd spoken to him, and he said that he wished he had have written a book, and he never did. And I actually, I'll show you something, Trigger, actually.
Yeah.
So just as he knew he was passing away, I was actually presented, and I'm showing the list. I'm showing Trigger. This is his challenge coin that was personally signed by Michael from a good friend of mine, Rick Meehan. And shout out to Rick, because Michael said just before he passed that he just couldn't get to the podcast, but he loved what I was doing for veterans and first responders, and he personally signed the coin, and I've actually got it, mate. I cherish this coin, mate. It's very, very special.
I was very lucky. Tim Britton and Vitka Bosco were both at the funeral, both Cross of Valour winners who I've known.
I know Tim as well. Yep.
Mark Donaldson was there, who I had not spoken to before, but he knew a lot of people that I knew from regiment days.
Yep.
And was a really nice guy. But I also got to meet Mike Bush, who's the new Chief Commissioner of Police. And I have to say, Mike was extremely impressive. His speech he gave was from memory, not referring to notes at all. Real Mick Miller vibes, that ramrod straight, suit and tie, instant respect. And I've since spoken to him another time and got to know him a little bit, and I think he's going to be great for Victoria Police. Good, really good. And I wish him all the best.
And mate, these are, as you mentioned, rest in peace, Michael, and his story was amazing. Unarmed, off duty, and went into a bank and was shot in the back. Just absolute courage. And you talk about Tim Britton, and I know Tim. I'm friends with Tim and Victor, and you talk all these guys, mate. Our Sparks and all these guys, mate. And yourself, mate, and what you did to receive your Clarke Medal was This was where you tackled the guy who poured petrol on himself, wasn't it?
So this was I won't go into the massive detail. But I got to go to a job. I was by myself, and I pulled up outside a property. There was a boat on a trailer. There was a lit campfire. There were two knocked-together sheds. And I got out, and I could hear someone howling. And I was a bit lax to just sort of barge straight in. I thought I'd circle round and just see what I was getting myself in for. And this guy he weighed probably about 150 kilo. He was having a psychotic incident. He was suicidal, and I managed to talk him in to make me a cup of tea. And he took a dog's collar off the side of the wall, wrapped it round his throat, commenced to strangle himself in front of me. And you're just trying to talk to him and hopefully make certain there's no weapons in the side. But I realised that I would have to take him into custody and take him down to the doctor, because his thoughts were just not where they should have been. So I told him not to go away and went up to the back of the car. If I'd had someone with me, they could have stayed with him, but I had to go by myself. And I opened up the back of the van, and in the back we have a prisoner pod, but sitting in there, one of the guys had left the chainsaw in overnight, and I thought, there's no way known I'm sticking him in his condition with a chainsaw. So I threw it in the back of the car and closed the door, and I turned around, and he'd followed me out. He was standing at the back of the boat, and he was lifting up a 20-litre jerry can of petrol, and he was pouring it on himself, and now he was walking towards the campfire carrying the jerry can, and I realised that the dog's collar probably wouldn't have killed him, because you can't strangle yourself to death. You go unconscious and then start breathing again. But this was major, and I sprinted over. But unfortunately, he was heading away from me towards the fire. If I'd been in the opposite direction, I might have been able to crash tackle him out of the way, but I had to go up to him, grab him and pull him back. And I got him like he was a pace away from the fire, and I grabbed his shirt, pulled, and buttons popped off, and it flicked a bit of petrol back in my glasses, down the front of my face, down my shirt. And I grabbed his wrist and said, "What are you doing?" As if it wasn't obvious. He started pulling me towards the fire. I started pulling him away from the fire. And this is when I found out that he was stronger than me. And I'm pulling harder. He's pulling harder. I'm watching petrol slop out of the jerry, dribble down half a metre from the flames. And your brain goes into overload. And I'm thinking, his centre of gravity was in his ankles. I just couldn't budge him. And his eyes are spinning, he's screaming, and frustrated at not being able to pull me into the fire with him with just one hand. He dropped the jerry can, and my whole world just went into slow motion. And it does that when you think you're going to die. And to this day, in my mind's eye, I can see that jerry can in like a slow-mo movie, and it hit the ground, wobbled, and didn't fall over and didn't explode. And I just went, oh. But before I could realise how lucky I was, with his free hand, he now grabbed me with his other hand. Now he had two hands on me, and now he's pulling, and now all professionalism's gone. He's screaming, I'm screaming. I've started having weird images of my kids going through my head. I remember my daughter, aged 5, in a white dress, laughing. And just when I thought that that's it, we're both going to go, and 20 litres is going to go up and burn both of us, he slipped, and then one hand came off, and I instead of pulling, I went the other way, and he pulled his hand back, and then I redirected. And if anyone does martial arts, Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu, they would know Kotegaeshi, which is probably the first move you ever make. And I had done it tens of thousands of times over the years. And I got him airborne and hit the ground and rolled him over and cussed him, and it was over. And look, in all honesty, 15, 20 seconds probably, but it was like a lifetime.
Yep.
The radio was about a metre away from me, and I could just hear Kev, who was doing temps at D24 at the time, and he's on the radio going, Triggy, you there? And I grabbed the radio, and I'm breathing hard into it. And I said, hey, it's good. He's fine. He's cuffed. Rest now. Kev's on the other end of the road going, rest now?
And you say that, mate. You're 6'7", and
I'm about 105, 110 myself. There's not too many people I can't make do what I want them to do.
That's what I mean. And when you said that in the book, it was you could fear. I could sense that fear of that. You and you talk. You mixed martial arts. You were, and like this guy had the jump, and you were looking, going, I'm gonna die. And do you feel? And this is where I'll bring this intrigue. Do you feel that you surrendered and went, this is it? This is how I'm like, and just that you sort of you're at peace that you were about to die?
No. I would say no. It was too quick. I was very close to panic. I knew that. I had to absolute tunnel vision. My mind was just locked onto that jerry can. It's the same. If you talk to people who have been in a stick up at a bank, they will give you massive detail about the gun pointed at them, but may not be able to tell you even whether or not the guy holding it had a beard, because you just lock onto that danger. I remember his foot coming very close to knocking it as we struggled, and just that lock on. And no, what happened was with the martial arts, you train until you don't have to think. And that's what saved me. Mm. The fact that you do something so many times that you do it. I do not remember thinking consciously, I am going to relax my hand in order to redirect to get this wrist lock on him. Mm. It just happened. And I put that down totally and utterly to martial arts training and repeating something over and over and over again until you can do it without thinking.
And mate, after that incident, how are you traveling mentally? Is this really where that's starting your PTS journey?
Yeah. So what happened was I realised after that normally after a really bad incident like that, you might have some nightmares, but after a few days it just goes away. This time it wasn't. This time to have the nightmares didn't go away. I started to get some trembling in my right hand. I thought to myself, in my left hand. And, you'd be sitting there and you'd look and your hand would be shaking. And you go, why is my hand shaking? And I knew a work cover claim, it was accepted. I wound up going to psychologists, but then they recommended that I do the 8-week full-time PTSD course at Post Trauma Victoria. But before I did that, work cover sent me to what I referred to as the PTSD bullshit detector, who was a psychiatrist. And have you ever seen that show, The Mentalist?
Yes.
Where the guy just basically just knows stuff? This is the closest I've ever come to ever meeting this, because I can remember sitting in his office, filling out my forms. I'm left-handed with my forms, and I'm filling them out. And then he came in and he introduced himself. And anyway, he explained that he's going to do this anyway. And his first question to me was, so what's the fishing like down in Malakuta? And I'm sitting there going, have we started? Or is he genuinely interested in fishing? Or what? And I said, I don't really know. And he goes, well, why don't you know? And I go, well, I haven't sort of been fishing much lately. And he goes, but you said on your form here your hobby's fishing. And I go, well, yeah, but I haven't sort of done. And every single question completely flummoxed me. And I had no idea where he was coming from, what he was doing. Every question just confused the hell out of me. And I'm sitting there going, the only time he stopped and questioned it was when I was talking about that incident. And I'm saying, and I'm sitting in the Melbourne Town Hall and Quentin Bryce is pinning this medal on me. And he said, excuse me. And I said, yeah. He said, Quentin Bryce, the Governor General. And I went, yeah. And he went, keep going. And that was it. And at the end of it, he just held up his hand and he's writing. And he said, right. He said, you've had nightmares. And I said, that's correct. Not too bad though. And I said, yes. And he said, and you've had some trembling in your hand? And I hadn't told him that. And I went, yes. And then he said, not too bad. And I went, that's correct. And then he looked at me and he said, just your left hand, right? And my jaw hit the floor. And I just looked at him and I said, how can you possibly know that? And he looked at me and he said, I watched you fill out your forms. You're left-handed. That's the hand with the fine motor skills and the one that normally goes first. And he said, don't worry about it. You've got PTSD. I'm going to recommend you do the course. And that just blew me away. Mm. And I thought, oh my God, you could not bullshit this guy if you tried. It was just impossible. So I did the course and it was amazing. I finally felt like I had landed with the experts. And these guys were nothing short of amazing. They were just like when you see a psychologist from the country, they may have done a little bit of work on PTSD, but it's not their specialty. So when you go to the guys that are world class, doctors in what they're doing, then that was it. Like, they got rid of my nightmares. It was fantastic. It was really good. And because I got better, I thought, I'll just go back to work. And then I had 8 critical incidents in 8 months, and the nightmares came back. But this time, you're not going to do the course a second time. They just said, no, mate, that's it. We recommend that you take a medical retirement. And I did that, and I have to admit, best thing I ever did. You don't realise the amount of pressure you're under every day in the police force until you leave. And when you leave, it's sad. I'm not going to miss the work at all. I am going to miss working with some of the guys, but it was like this massive weight had just been lifted off my shoulders, and I haven't looked back. It's been great.
And I'm going to mention too, and I'll bring this in. You weren't finished with getting yourself into danger and getting a few more bravery commendations. You received a couple more of those as well. So throw them into the mix. And
so yeah, it was, and it's and then my daughter's got me to write my book, a memoir, and I never thought it was going to get published, and when it was, I thought I was going to have to buy every copy to give to extended family as Christmas presents for 10 years. And so when it sold out in 3 weeks and got accepted by the Melbourne Film Festival for adaptation into a TV series, I was stunned. I couldn't believe. And I've been giving talks and podcasts, and like I sent a copy to Sly Sylvester from Herald the Sun, who writes in The Age, who writes in the Saturday Age, and he phoned me up and said, mate, and he can be fickle as to whether he likes you or not. And he said, mate, loved it. And he wrote a full-page review of the book in the Saturday Age.
Wow.
And I could not have asked for that. I could not have paid for that type of advertising. And it's just been amazing. So I really enjoy telling some of the more funny stories and some of the not so funny ones, depending on who the audience is.
Of course.
And it's been great. And then trying to work on a second book and being asked to co-author a third. So life is busy.
And I was going to ask you that because, you mentioned, you got diagnosed with PTSD, and on the 17th of January in 2017, after 31 years, you transition away, and every veteran, every first responder I've had on struggle with that transition. But you've, through the book, through, the TV stuff, and now your second book, and how has your transition gone? Has it been that you've been able to keep yourself busy that has got you to that transition of you found purpose again after service?
A lot of police officers who I've known who have done multiple decades and have left the police force are angry. They are angry at real or perceived slights of how they left, that they didn't want to leave. And guys I've worked with for many, many years have had real issues and real problems and are angry. Anger and PTSD is intimately linked. I didn't hate the department when I left. I thought I had 31 years. Yes, there are some things in it that I didn't like about it, but it's no use dwelling on those at all. You're far better off seeing the good in what you've done. And as a result of that, I've been invited back to the police academy to talk to recruits about what it was like working in the country, about why you should consider a career in the country rather than staying in Melbourne, and like a lot of police-related podcasts, both nationally and internationally, on giving talks about the career that I've had, which has been great. So doing the book and then getting into I kind of feel like I've kind of left the police force, but I haven't. Because if you retire, you can accept your police identification back, and I can still show that when I go to a police station and go in and have a cuppa with the guys. I still go back occasionally to some of the police stations to have a chat to the guys. Even, I'm coming up to 10 years retired. Still do that occasionally, just to sit back and see the guys and see what they've been doing and have a chat to them. So it's been great. Although I've sort of like, you're officially retired, I kind of haven't.
Yeah.
Because you're under work cover, I still have to send my 3 monthly certificates of capacity to Victoria Police.
Yeah, right.
So it's not, you haven't kind of totally and utterly finished in a way. Yes, I'm no longer on the payroll of Victoria Police, but I'm still there, and like, getting to go to events and, funerals and that type of thing. It's been really good to be able to do it.
You mentioned you wrote your book, mate, mate, I know what that's like, being a published author as well, and congratulations. And mate, was that a cathartic process for you, getting your story down on paper? Very.
I found that I didn't actually write a lot of it. I spoke it. I used Otter AI. I found that I was very good at talking about the jobs I went to, and people found it humorous if you pick the humorous jobs.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Blue Ribbon Foundation's Insider Story team, so I get to do this now. Insider Story is normally detectives talking about high-risk jobs in that, but my jobs were incredibly different when you're talking about, like, the sharing of the teeth and the horse, and that people are just, you would have them in stitches about these types of stories, but it's still police work. It may not be the incredibly detailed study of law and how you got people to do stuff, but you find that people love all aspects of policing, and the humour of the side of that is still fantastic, and they love it. So doing that has kept me sort of in with what I was with being a police officer. So even though I'm no longer on the payroll, I still feel like I represent the police force. And
you do, mate, and you play a significant, by sharing your story, it's helping, if someone listens to this podcast, mate, who is at that point of transition and they hear your story, and you're right, so many feel angry, or they, and they are stuff the police or stuff the department or whatever, whichever, agency they're with, whether it's state or federal. And, to hear this story, they might go, actually, you can give so much back to the organisation as well. You don't have to have that angry and be pissed off with the organisation.
Yes, exactly. And that has made my transition so much easier.
And mate, I've got a few final questions, and I thank you so much for your time, mate. And knowing what you know now, mate, and everything that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Ooh, that is a really hard question to do it. My 18-year-old self, unfortunately, was not very mature. I would like to think that I was mature at 18, but I was not.
Every 18-year-old says that, mate.
Every 18-year-old says that. Although I got to admit, I look at my oldest daughter at 18 and I think, wow, she's got probably 3 times more maturity at her age than I had at mine. At 18, I was only interested in one thing, and I think that was women. And so it was hard for me to do. I don't have many regrets. Everyone, I think, in hindsight, would change things, but overall, I felt that my career was okay. Would it have been better to have stayed in Melbourne and, rose through the ranks from there, or would you have preferred to have stayed in the bush, to have done that? I mean, to have raised 3 girls in the country with a wife, and next year is our 25th wedding anniversary. So many police I know have not been able to stay married for that long.
They're on their 3rd marriage.
Yeah, very much so. So for me to be able to do that is significant to me, and the girls are fantastic. All 3 of them have now got, looking at careers, or maybe not the youngest, but she's getting there. She's only 18, and I would do it. So no, there's not that much that I would have done differently. You've got to follow your dream.
Mm.
If you have a dream to become a policeman, become a policeman. Advice would be to try and find a mentor, to try and find someone who you get on with, who you can ask advice, who you can look at saying, I'd really like to get into this. How can I do this? What can I do this? Am I best in doing these courses, not doing these courses, that type of thing. It's fantastic. I don't care which police force you go into. I know that all of them are very similar. I think WA and Queensland are probably the highest paid. Australian Federal Police is also really good, mainly because you get to go to Treasure Island. What's Treasure Island? Treasure Island is any overseas deployment where you get paid a lot of money. But it's very different, and it depends what you want to do.
Mm.
A lot of people just want to go into Special Operations Group or into CERT or into Search and Rescue, but don't hang your love of a job just on getting into that career. Be open-minded. If you don't get into one, it's not the end of the world. I loved working by myself. I loved working with the guys. The guys that I worked with in the country were some of the most dedicated, best police officers that I think I've ever worked with. They were absolutely fantastic. Some of them have gone on to have incredible careers. One of the sergeants who I worked with now, I think he's Attorney General in Indonesia with DFAT. Just incredible careers that have come into it.
And you don't know, mate, where your career's going to go, and you say, and I always say it to young people all the time, is it doesn't matter what job you do, just give your all to it, because someone might, a millionaire might be, if you work at a service station and a millionaire comes in and, they run a business, they might see your work ethic, and you never know where you're going to end up. So give it your all. And like you said, that guy is now DFAT, like look at where he's got to. And that's what it is. Just give your all, and you never know where you can end up. And for you, mate, what advice would you give to the families of first responders? Because they go on a journey with you, and they experience the highs, they experience the lows. What advice would you give to the families that, of a first responder?
Be understanding that there's going to be times when you need to be alone, and that if at some stage you may seem angry, it's not because you're angry at them, it's because you're trying to process information that you are wanting. One of the advice I give to the recruits when I'm talking to them, and this is one of the biggest ones I think I have, is keep your friends outside the police force when you join the police force. And that, I would say, is the same for the military. Try and keep your friends from outside the military, because when you join the military or you join the police force, it's very insular. Everyone thinks the same way. Everybody works the same way. Everyone has a very similar psychological schema. They're very detail-oriented. They see things in black and white. And when you're in that group, you can lose perspective on what it's like outside that. So by keeping your friends outside the force, it will keep you grounded. And I've got a lot of friends who have retired now in not just police force, but also in the military. And it's the ones that have kept their friends outside the force when they've been in there who have transitioned the easiest by coming back into it. And with the families, talk. You really do need to talk to them. I would often tell my wife about the jobs I went to. Not every policeman does that, but I found that if she understood what it was I went through, the horror of fatal accidents, then she would have a better understanding of how I was feeling. And that worked for me. May not work for everyone, but it did for me. So it's something to consider.
Great advice. And mate, looking back now with all that you've been through and experienced and the trauma, was joining the army and joining the police still the best decision apart from marrying your beautiful wife and having your 3 daughters?
Yes, I would definitely agree that. Even the fact that I've had 13 operations and I wished that my physical health was and mental health was far better, I don't think that I would have had a job. You're never bored. How many people have careers and they are bored? You are not bored in the military, and you are not bored, definitely not bored, in the police force, because any day can produce something that is so out there that you will just be stunned by it. Nursing, paramedicine, same. Every single day, you never know. It could be that you're stuck in the office doing paperwork, or it could be that you are running into something like Bondi. You just never know. And because of that, you can never get bored. You just don't know what will ever happen. I remember one day I'm sitting down going, gee, I wonder what I'll do today, when the park ranger phones me up and says, can you ride a dirt bike? I went, yes. And they said, oh, do you want to take a run up the beach? I went, sure. And they were looking for abalone poachers. But I'm riding a 250cc motorcycle on the beach and thinking, I am getting paid to do this.
How good is this?
How good is this? Very much so.
And that's right, mate. And that's why I like to highlight to the civilian listeners is that, you know, it's being in the military, being a first responder, they are not normal jobs. They are very unique, and it can go from 0 to 100. And you mentioned Bondi last weekend, and this podcast will come out a few weeks post the or a couple of months post the event, the tragic events that happened at Bondi. But you're right, mate. That was just a normal day, and you know, looking at the time, it happened an hour ago last Sunday. Like, you know, and what those guys went into was just unbelievable. And yeah, as you say, policing is and any first responder is it's a unique job. And mate, in your opinion, and it actually is a great segue, and you've segued that beautifully. In your opinion, what more needs to be done to support police with the traumas that they face on a day-to-day basis?
Every state police force is slightly different. We had some issues whereby working on the border, whereby if I went to a fatal accident across into New South Wales, there was nothing logged into the Victorian system, so it remained off the radar, even though I might have been pulling a dead kid out of a car, which was traumatic. I think that the police forces are getting better at it, from welfare to peer support to sergeants needing to put in specific paperwork to get people help. And I think that there's sometimes a little bit of stigma for people to say, look, I'm struggling a bit, having some nightmares. I think that is going away as well. I think that mental health now is definitely taking a far greater front seat in first responder jobs, and it's great. You can never ever tell as to how much trauma you can experience before it becomes too much. On the PTSD course, we had a young constable who had 18 months in the police force. He'd gone to a single demonstration and had PTSD. On the other hand, we had a commander with 40 years police experience, and his recollection were as a young Connie, he was an undercover operator and he had Russian roulette played with him for real. And that one thing tipped him over where he recalled that and he had it. Me, I had 31 years in the job, but others may have 10. You just don't know. It's something that's in there. But once it happens, you need to be able to tell people about it. And I think that the police force is definitely getting better. I wish that we had better equipment, and we were just talking about this before, but if the first police cars that responded to Bondi had rifles with them and were trained in their use, then I believe that lives would have been saved, because you can sit off 100 or 200 metres away and return fire and not have to close under fire to within 20 or 30 metres in order to put effective fire down on that type of thing. It's rare. Fortunately, in Australia, things like this are rare, but that doesn't mean that police should not have the tools to be able to effective in the rare case that it does happen. Absolutely. It would be great if we have tactical response teams that were instantaneous, but they never are. It's always the Johnny on the spot police officers who are working the van or the cars that are going to be first there, and they are going to be the ones having to do it. And you've got young kids that are doing this and they know that that's their job, that they have to do it. So don't think that you're going to militarise the police force by giving them long arms. They can be kept in the boot of the car and give them what they need to be able to safely save members' lives of the public and their own.
Mate, we spoke about it before we jumped on and started recording this podcast that, that was 1,000,000 to 1 shot that detective took to end that siege. And, there's been so much criticism that has come to the police on the ground and I know because I've done so many podcasts now, mate, that I actually understand that a Glock can shoot accurately to 20 metres. So to move, as you're saying, fire and movement forward, and you talk about the military, they do fire, well, because you're an ex-military as well, fire and movement, but you've got a long arm firearm that you can fire and move it's a Glock. And I absolutely take my hat off to all of those police officers. They were brave, and one of them has lost an eye because, he was moving towards the fire. Absolute courage, mate. Absolute courage.
The bravery shown by those guys, people might think that, when police shoot someone, you will always have somebody come up with the, why don't you just shoot him in the leg scenario. When you're returning fire, it's because you're going to die or someone else is going to die, and you have to try and stop that person from doing that. Mm-hmm. So you're not calm and collected. There've been studies done where your heart rate can go up to 400 beats per minute. You will have sweat in your eyes. You will be shaking with the amount of noradrenaline and cortisol that is dumped into your system. There's like over 100 things that happen to your body when you think that you're going to die. So you have to accurately aim, fire, and not hit anybody else. Mm-hmm. Okay? But you've got to stop that person. The unbelievable bravery that those guys showed is something that I don't think is talked about enough.
I agree, mate. And recently I had Zach Roth on the podcast, and he was going through the same thing. He was being stabbed, and just bravery to return fire to, and this is what I mean. This is why I do these podcasts, mate, to highlight what you guys do on the ground. And, mate, keyboard warriors, very,
Oh,
armchair critics sit back and you sit back and you think, well, were you there? Were you there? No, you weren't.
yeah.
It was amazing people like yourself and so many other people that, pull on the blue uniform to protect us and civilians. It's absolute bravery, mate, and it's just a miracle, mate, that not more people were killed, and it's an absolute tragedy that 15 people were lost, and that's rest in peace, all of those innocent people, mate. That
I, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Zach, but I do know his father quite well.
yes, yep,
And I do have to say that both of us have definitely walked the same thing because I don't know if you're aware of it, but Zach is also a Clarke Silver Medal recipient.
yes, I do know that, mate. I absolutely know that, and for what he did, mate, it's amazing that the NT Police go back and actually listen to his podcast because they never actually put him up for anything.
Yes, very much so.
Amazing. So yes, and mate, I know Richard very well as well, and Zach is, mate, someone that he's a mate of mine, and I class, very privileged to call him a friend, and it's you look at it, mate, and like, yeah, just mate, another amazing human that, as you said, is part of that point. What was it, mate? 0.33%. Point.
0.0003%.
There you go. That there you go. There you go, mate. That's absolutely, yeah, just amazing people, mate. You absolutely all do amazing work, and mate, it's just been wow. Like, I mean, mate, it's hard to cram 31 years into 2.5 hour.
Couple of hours.
We could probably we could have spoken for another 4 or 5 hours, but
Yeah,
mate, a couple final questions before I
sure.
let you go. And mate, what advice would you give to anyone who is thinking of, joining the reserves and going down that, SF, become a commando? And how did you mentally and physically prepare? And what advice would you give to them?
The martial arts training that I'd received was very good. I can't specify enough the mental conditioning that you have to do. Physical stuff is something that you can work on really hard. The mental stuff is far harder. I did an expedition in June of 1982 to the Amazon, where me and one other guy, John Harrison, we kayaked 300 kilometres up one of the unknown tributaries of the Amazon, and it was unbelievably hard. It was the wettest dry season in 30 years. It would take me up to 3 hours to light a fire. I had to carve bark off trees to get in a bark that was half dry to try and start a fire. People think that paddling upstream's easy. It's not. I remember lines on the side of the Rio Jari, the Amazon River, that we were pulling up to do this, and I can remember when going through training for commandos, when you would have very little sleep. The lack of sleep was the killer. If you've only slept for a few hours over about 3 days, you are so bone tired. And then they would have like a nice sunny day, and they'd put a hoochie down, and then they'd get a kilo of brown rice and a kilo of white rice, and they would just pour it into the middle, and they'd mix it, and they'd say, okay, guys, we're in another country and we've got to help the locals, and they want that rice separated. So you're lying down, sorting out grains of rice. Whoever thought that up? Oh, my God. Conditions, you've got the sun beating you down. You're not moving. All you want to do is just close your eyes and go to sleep, and you're just nudging other people. I remember some guys actually took a toothpick and stuck it up under his friggin' lip so that if he did fall asleep, it'd jerk him awake. on the side. It was so hard to do it. So it's that mental discipline. And I remember being so tired, like sitting in an ambush for 2 days and basically pissing in my pants for that amount of time. And then it was Shorty Ramirez walked over, who'd done like 3 tours of Vietnam. He was a tiny little guy and he had a walking stick. And he looks over to me and he's looking at me and he goes, "I don't think you're enjoying yourself, recruit." And I've gone, "Oh, no, Sergeant, I'm having a ball." And then he'd tell me about some time where he lay in an ambush for 2 weeks in Vietnam. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh, I don't really have much to freaking whinge about." But whenever anything got tough, I remember thinking back to that Amazon trip and dragging my ass up that river. And I'm thinking to myself, I think that was actually harder.
Yeah.
So I was able to relate to it so desperately, like a really strict martial arts where you are doing it. That is great. And then if you're doing any outdoor adventure stuff, snow camping, hiking, go to the Himalayas. If you think that hiking is easy, wait till you do it above 5,000 meters and your oxygen saturation's down in the high 70s. And then some 12-year-old kid carrying 40 kilos in a pair of flip-flops runs past you up a 40-degree slope. It certainly is humbling. It's just amazing to do that. And it's that mental conditioning and toughening that I would say go for. Certainly stick to the physical stuff, but it's the mental stuff that'll get you.
No, great advice, mate. And I think, like anyone that can, push themselves, and yourself, mate, your mind will give up, long before your body will, and you just got to keep pushing, keep pushing, just keep going, and that's what life is too. And mate, what are your plans now going forward with your family into the future? You said, you're writing the books and you're busy now with talks, but what are your plans going forward with your wife and your kids?
Oh, look, at the moment we're selling our farm that I live in Malakuta, and that'll free us up. My wife's mother is now very elderly. She wants to move back to be with her in her last years. We've got a smaller property that we bought as an Airbnb. I'll go in and do that. And then I want to teach the girls. I must admit those 4 years I spent traveling were incredibly informative and some of the best times of my life. So my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter, I've both taken over to the Himalayas. My oldest daughter has been well up over 5,000 meters and my youngest daughter to 4.5. And my middle daughter's not that keen on doing it, but I'm sure I'll take her up, but I would love to go back and doing it. Traveling's great. And to not travel is like to own a book and only ever read one page.
I absolutely, mate, as you know, you're reading my book at the moment, and mate, after my suicide attempt, I actually went over and did 19 countries in 6 months, and that was through the advice of my psychologist, who said you need to go and get out of your comfort zone and you need to do something that is totally, you're on your own, you don't have your family. And mate, it was honestly the best time of my life. What I learnt about myself in that 6 months while I was overseas, as you learned in the 4 years that you were away, there's nothing better than being in foreign countries and you're on your own. You don't have you don't have a safety net. You don't have a parachute to come home to your family. You got to overcome adversity overseas, and I highly recommend any young person go and travel before you go and choose your career, because you get a bit of life experience and you learn so much about yourself.
Definitely. And the one thing travel taught me, it doesn't matter what colour your skin is, what language you are, what religion you are, how rich or poor you are. Everyone in the world is exactly the same. All anybody wants is to just have a nice life. Most people are friendly.
Yep.
I've probably been treated better by Muslims in developing countries than I ever have by Christians in developed countries. But it doesn't matter. I got to admit, though, being in a Muslim country as a male would probably be a huge difference than to travelling solo as a female. But my own experience has been fantastic. I loved it, and I'm hoping to at least get the girls and to try and do that with them.
Yeah, awesome. And mate, I hope you have many more, adventures, mate, and get a few more stamps in that passport, mate, that has already had many passports over the years, and hopefully you get to travel a bit more. And mate, how do people contact you and follow you, and if they want to book you for a talk, or how do they follow what you're doing?
Well, look, the website is 3hoursaway.com.au, and there's Instagram on that as well, although I think my 21-year-old daughter handles that for me because I cannot work out Instagram for the life of me. They can contact me just through my name, Mark Triggellas, on Facebook. And ever since the book's come out, I've now, I can't remember how many followers I've got, but I'll try and put in there if anybody wants to contact me through the website or just through Google, through LinkedIn. My mobile phone number's available. They can contact me, and I'm more than happy to come over somewhere. I travel down to Melbourne regularly, and if you have a group that you think would benefit from some of my stories, then contact me, and I'll be more than happy to come out and talk about it.
Nah, and mate, when we release the podcast, we'll put all the links in the show notes so people can get to you. And mate, if they want to get a signed copy of the book, they can. But mate, it's been wow, what a story, and this is only touching the surface of your story, and I've left some other key stories from the book, so people can actually buy your book. So get out and buy Mark's book, and mate, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for your service to the state of Victoria. Mate, you've served your country with honour and served your state with honour and brought pride to your family. Your story is just one of true grit, determination, and, never giving in. And, mate, I want to thank you for all that you do for veterans and first responders, and for coming on True Blue and sharing your story, mate. It's been an absolute honour and privilege, so thank you.
Thanks, Adam. It's been great.
Thanks, mate. And I look forward to catching up with you and having a beer soon, mate. So looking forward to it.
Be fantastic. Can't wait.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice, and determination. See you next time.